as this title suggests, we're going to be looking at a couple different women throughout the biblical text. And this is something that is significant for so many different reasons, but also I think it's an opportunity for women and men alike to ask questions. Sometimes we read the Bible, or we come to church, or you perhaps are looking at coming and studying with us in Bible college. And the question that I often get is why? Why theology, or why vocational training, or why Bible college? And something that I've loved over the years is that it allows me the space to ask questions. Sometimes in church, when someone's giving a preach or a sermon, it's not appropriate to raise your hand and be like, oh, excuse me, pastor, preacher, I just have a couple questions about what you're talking about. But in this space, it is okay. And it's actually welcomed. And this is the place that we want you to ask questions, maybe even questions that you would feel are a bit taboo or not allowed. It's allowed here. So first question that I have is, why do you think models of women from the Bible are important for us to look at? Any ideas? I'll leave some time for you guys to look at it. Should I call on someone? Ooh. I think I'm going to call on Daniel Packer.
Okay, I think that models of women are important to. Oh, sorry.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. I think you have a bit of a sound thing. Why don't I ask Michelle, do you have any ideas? Daniel said in the chat that models of women are important to show diversity. I think that's great. What else?
Well, I think they can inspire us, right?
Yeah.
To improve ourselves and to grow also in our perspective of God. Like, how can we know him personally? Yeah, like more intimacy, being a woman. Like, what particularities we can discover of him.
Yes, 100%. It tells us more about who we are, more about who God is. Yeah, 100%. I love that. Rebecca, do you have any thoughts? Oh, she might be still on mute. That's all right. But no, that's exactly right. What you were saying is it shows us different examples. It allows us to imagine different ways that God, the possibilities that God could use women to partner with him. We also get to interact with the story from a woman's perspective. Sometimes when you're reading the Bible, or you're even just the way that a lot of our societies are designed, they're not designed with women in mind. So when we get to look at women in the biblical text, we get to see from their point of view. We get to see how God sometimes uses women that are the most unlikely of characters, the unexpected one, maybe a little bit of the underdog, the person that you wouldn't have necessarily thought would be the hero of the story. And this is an example of how we get to read the Bible and engage with these stories in a subversive way. So it offers us an alternative way of seeing one another, and maybe an alternative way of seeing the way that God would use people. It's also a great way that we see God's heart towards all of humanity. So it doesn't matter your class, it doesn't matter your gender, it doesn't matter how much money you have, it doesn't matter, your status per se. It's about what God sees, and he's willing to partner with anybody. I love that women are also at the heart of the story. Usually we kind of talk about women and it's almost like this added afterthought perhaps, or maybe there are these supporting roles, but that's actually not necessarily true. Women are just as central and pivotal to the different stories that are spoken about and demonstrated throughout the Bible. And it's important for us to recognize that and see that. As much as I love a good David and Goliath story, that's not the only story in the Bible. And maybe that's not the only one we should be preaching from either. And so this is an opportunity that we would open our imagination to the different people, the different models, the different examples, and in that, hopefully see God in a clearer way, or in at least a different way. So lots of different reasons why we should read and engage to look for women in the text. I love what Acts 2 says. So as a good Pentecostal, we find so much of our story and our identity and who we are in the first day of Pentecost, right? So Acts 2, it reads like this. This is what was spoken by the prophet Joel. In the last days, God says, I will pour out my spirit on all people. I love that, all people. So again, it's the equalizer. It's not how much money you have, how much you've studied, where your family's from, who you come from. No, it's all people that God would pour out his spirit. Your sons and your daughters will prophesy. Your young men will see visions. Your old men will dream dreams. Even on my servants, both men and women, I will pour out my spirit in those days, and they will prophesy. I absolutely love this text because I'm sure some of you do know, there are controversial parts within the Bible. I often tell my students, it's definitely not rated G. The Bible is probably M for mature, maybe even R at times. There's a lot of different content in there that is, it's heavy. In our Australian colloquialism, we would say it's full on, but that's not something that we have to close our eyes to, blind our eyes to, and go, oh, no, I'm not going to look at that because it's too dangerous. Oh, no, that's too controversial. So let's pretend it's not in there. No, that's not, this is the space that we can go, oh, wow, this is real life. God's not intimidated by it. He doesn't shy away from it. If anything, he's recorded humanity's story, different people's stories, so that you and I can read and engage and go, oh, that person's a little bit like me. Okay, they're a bit messed up. Okay, cool. It's not just me. Oh, wow, they're struggling. All right, it's not just me. Oh, wow, those women encountered so many struggles and they had to learn how to navigate life under, at times, dangerous circumstances. They had to deal with politics and power and all those different things. That's perhaps not very different from what people experience today. And so we see examples of that in the Bible. I love this quote. So Kimberly Irvin Alexander, she's a Pentecostal scholar, and she says that our mission as the followers of Christ, our mission as the people of God, is to be a witness, to show the world through our love for one another that Jesus is the Son of God. This destiny, it's a high calling of both the church and the individual, of both men and women. And it's only achieved through the help of the Holy Spirit, and as it's being poured on all people, and they find their purpose, their meaning, their voice. So again, I kind of am reiterating, it's not men versus women, it's not women versus men, it's when all people find their voice and they find their purpose in what God's called them to do. Any thoughts, comments, anything you're just like, oh, I feel like I really wanted to share something? You can jump in it, you can either say it now or you can put it in the chat, and then we'll just kind of start looking at a couple different people. I personally love the story of Esther. She is an unlikely hero, and perhaps she's maybe a little bit of the one of the first people that we think of when we think of women in the Bible. I don't know about you, when people are like, oh, who's your favorite character from the Bible? At least when I was in Sunday school, it was usually like Queen Esther. And then I came to Bible college and I learned about her story, and I was like, oh, wow, she is much more than just a pretty face. She is much more than just a queen. She is much more than just someone that a book was named after in the Bible. She was somebody who was a model of courage in the face of certain death. She had to overcome trials. She had to learn to navigate what was at that time a society that was run by your status, by your power, by your position. She was married to a mad king. Like, that in itself is dangerous territory. And here she is offered the opportunity or the challenge, we would call it maybe an opportunity today, but at the time it was probably the most scary and confronting thing to do when her cousin Mordecai came to her and said, will you go out on behalf of your people and try to save them and go before the king, knowing that if she went to the king unannounced, it would result in certain death. And she took on that challenge and she faced it with courage. And I love this story because it gives us an example of our callings, that we are chosen and we're appointed for significance, regardless of the challenge and the difficulty. Just because we follow Christ doesn't mean it's going to be easy. Just because we see examples of women in the text doesn't mean that I'm going to get this open door access to different things that I would love to experience, or, the opportunities that I would love to go after. With those opportunities also comes perhaps opposition, conflict. At times we look at this story and it's certain death, but yet within that framework is the opportunity for God to do a miracle. I love that the calling, that the appointment of significance is less about who she was per se, and a lot about her willingness, a lot about her trust in who God is. And perhaps for us, we're going, oh my goodness, yeah, I don't think that I'm going to become queen anytime soon and be able to be part of something that changes the trajectory of history, that she saves an entire people group, the Jews, from annihilation. Awesome. That's a memorable story that perhaps my name won't be attached to, but maybe the other choices that I make, maybe the things that seem a little bit less significant, have just as much of an important role in not just my life, but in somebody else's life. Maybe it's that conversation. Again, it's like that quote I read earlier, that they would know who we are, that we are followers of Christ for the love that we have for one another. And that calling and that appointment is just as significant. So love the story of Esther. Also, we look at the person of Deborah. So I don't know about you, but I didn't know very much about Deborah before I came to college. If anything, I don't even think I knew who she was. She is, if you didn't know, she was actually a judge, and she was a prophet in the Old Testament. She's recorded as one of the only judge and prophets within the book of Judges. And it's in a time period where Israel had done evil in the eyes of the Lord. They had turned their hearts away from trusting God. And she is appointed to this position to bring correction, to remind Israel of who they are, of who their God is. And I love this verse. It says, now Deborah, a prophet, a wife, was leading Israel at this time. She held court under the palm of Deborah between Raham and Bethel in the hill country of Ephraim. And the Israelites went up to her to have their disputes decided. To my left is this beautiful glass painting, and it's this picture of Deborah sitting underneath this palm tree, and the different men of Israel are coming to her to ask for advice, to ask for counsel, ask for her to speak on behalf of these different issues that they're facing. I love that within this narrative, we see an example of women sitting in a position where they are advocating for justice. They're advocating for truth. They're advocating for doing what is right in the eyes of the Lord. They are counselors. Sometimes we think ministry has to look a certain way. You have to perhaps be a pastor or maybe be a Sunday school teacher. But here's a great example of how ministry isn't just a vocation. It's your life. The calling that God perhaps has placed in your heart can look in different ways. Maybe you're supposed to be in government, maybe you're supposed to be in business, maybe it's within your family, that you would be a person that can speak wisdom. You could be a person that would be an example of godly counsel and righteousness, that you would advocate for justice for God's people, that it doesn't have to fit one box. It's not one size fits all when it comes to God. And we see that in the story of Deborah. We see that in the fact that she was a judge and she was a prophet, that the kings were coming to her for counsel and for direction. How amazing. I don't know about you, but that kind of gives me goosebumps, that maybe I won't be Queen Esther. That's okay. Maybe I won't be, the most famous public speaker in the world. Maybe I won't build the biggest church, and that's okay. But there might be people in my world that will come to me for advice, that will ask me what do you think God would ask of me in this situation? What do you think it means to do justice, to love the Lord, to walk, in faithfulness and to God and what he's called us to? And that you and I, because of the Spirit of God that's in us, and we see this example in different women, that we can speak to that we can speak to the heart of God in those situations. And then, obviously, this is a brief class, so there's so many examples of different women in the Old Testament, and I just wanted to reference a couple so that it's less about going, oh, this one's my favorite, I'm going to name and claim her, but maybe it's familiarizing ourselves. Maybe there's a lot of women that you're like, oh, I didn't even know they were there. I had no idea about Miriam and her role. Yeah, she's a sister of Moses, but I didn't know the significance of, the songs that she declared, that she was considered like a prophet to Israel in that time. Or again, we've talked about Deborah or Hannah and her faith, Abigail, Isaiah's wife. We've got, again, the Esther, the whole chapter in the Songs of Solomon that is about the beloved, this love letter that's going on. We've got so many different women: Hagar, Rebecca, Tamar, Ruth. There's so many different examples of people that we go to that story. We see how God is interacting, how he's using perhaps unlikely characters or perhaps people that we would have overlooked, but it's for a significant purpose. So the women, I love this idea, switching directions a little bit. Let's jump into the New Testament, right? So I don't know about you, but I've had different questions asked of me, and I've probably asked of myself. We're like, oh yeah, that's great. Love Deborah, love Esther, but that's Old Testament. Isn't it different? Well, it's not. You know what God is doing in the Old Testament, what God did in the New Testament, and what God is doing today is of equal significance. There's no gradient. There's no, this is more important and that's less important. But it's also seeing how this shows us a little bit of who God is, and that he would use people that perhaps we would overlook and that we wouldn't even name. And so we've named a couple different, amazing figures, but how about the women that were nameless? How about the women that we might, if I was crossing by in a street, I wouldn't have even acknowledged who they are. We've got the example of the woman at the well, the woman with the issue. Oh my gosh. For all the women in the room, how many issues have you had to deal with? This speaks to me. The woman with the issue, whether this woman literally had a physical ailment, but maybe it's an emotional thing. Maybe the fact that all of us right now are experiencing a global, worldwide pandemic. There's this emotional weight. There is literally people who have lost loved ones in the face of COVID. And we can all perhaps resonate with, oh yeah, I get what it's like to be a woman with an issue, to have things to deal with. We've got the example, the woman who's caught in the act of adultery. We have the widow with her 2 mites. We have the girl who was raised from dead. Perhaps these women, yes, they were unnamed in the text, but that doesn't mean that they have less significance. Yes, maybe they were lacking social status or economic status. Maybe, nobody would have recognized them in the streets that day, but that doesn't mean that they were lacking of God, that they were lacking to be recipients of God's grace. And nevertheless, her story, whoever she is, whatever her name is, perhaps we don't know it today, but it won't be forgotten. It's recorded. It's something that we will continue to share. The story of the woman at the well is an example of transformation, and where a woman's life is completely turned around because of her encounter with Jesus, that leads her to be one of the greatest evangelists and witness in that time period. She was a Samaritan, and she went and testified to the goodness of God that led an entire area, a city, a group of people to come to know who Jesus was. Talk about, wow, a woman who doesn't even have a name and how influential she was. Or the woman with the issue of blood, her relentless faith, her determination, the fact that she would put herself in harm, in danger, that she even broke customs and rule to touch the hem of Jesus's garment. It shows us courage and determination in a time where it was anything but easy to be a woman. And today, maybe this is an encouragement for yourself. It's not easy. Life isn't always easy, but how we can hold on to these examples. Or an example of the woman who was caught in the act of adultery, where Jesus completely, he rid her of that public shame. He dismantled that system, or that casting that would say you are a bad person, there's no redemption or hope for you. That all of us who've come to know Christ have understood that we are dead in our sins and transpasses, but it's God's grace and mercy that takes away our shame and offers us an opportunity of new life. I love the example of the widow and her generosity and her virtue. To be a widow in the ancient world was nothing to boast about. It was actually something, so first of all, economically challenging, but it also carried the weight and the shame and the symbolism of perhaps of lack, of nothing, that you don't have covering, you don't have protection. But God would use that, and he would redeem that, and he would even elevate this woman and the little that she had, even her status as a widow, to go, no, this woman was most virtuous. She was most righteous. She's the greatest example of generosity. And and then again, the story of Jairus's daughter, somebody who, again, wasn't named, a young girl. We don't know, her story. All we know is who her dad was, and that Jesus would interact with her, that he would raise her from the dead, and the future that she would have. And that's part of our story. So we say all these things to remember, yes, who those women were, to acknowledge what it was like to live in that time period, but to also recognize the impact, or the example that it sets for us today as followers of Christ. Let's take a quick second. Any thoughts, comments, things that kind of shocked you or stood out to you? Daniel, you've got a question. What made Deborah different in the effectiveness of her ministry from other women in the Bible who didn't maybe have such influence culturally? Yeah, that's a great question, Dan. Let me just change this for a second. Deborah, it's not necessarily the most clear in the story. We know that it says that she was righteous and that she exercised justice. In chapter 4, at the beginning of chapter 4, it says Israel had done evil in the eyes of the Lord. And then it goes and lists the different things that were going on under the different rulers. And so for whatever reason, Deborah was a standout. She must have presented herself amongst her community as somebody who demonstrated integrity, when her peers, her community, we're not talking about even like the external people, were doing the opposite. And so maybe that spoke to it less of what God simply saw in her, but maybe also what her community saw in her, that she would be that person that everyone would go to. Sarah, you had a comment. You said, being a woman has, I love her. Who are you talking about? Sorry, I'm trying to follow this. Go ahead.
Okay, so I was talking about Deborah.
Yes.
And you went into it, where she's a judge, she's a prophet, she's also a wife and a woman, and I just love that about her whole situation. Being a woman wasn't something that was like an afterthought.
Yeah.
It was very intentionally laid out that, as on top of being a prophet and being a judge, she was a woman, and that wasn't something she had to get over in order to do the things that God had called her to do. It was just part of the whole package. Yeah. And I think oftentimes, especially in ministry and the way that we read models of the Bible, it's, am I putting that sort of on the back burner of my life in order to accomplish what God has called me to do? Maybe because we haven't given as much focus as you've given us today to those women in the Bible that we can look at as models. So that was just my reflection.
Yeah, I love that. I love that it's not an either or, right? Like, and like exactly like you said, she didn't just, put something on the back burner. And sometimes there's this rhetoric. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I know for myself, I've had to say like, oh, well, if I want to do this, I'm probably going to have to maybe give up on that other dream or sacrifice this other desire in my heart. And here we see an example of maybe God using all of it. You know what I mean? Like that our whole lives would be a witness to the goodness of God, not just the polished, pretty parts that we've decided are the preferred areas, not just the certain job descriptions and roles. Yes, a pastor, but a prophet, I don't know about that. Oh, you want to travel the world, but I don't know if you're going to be able to have a family if you do that. Well, maybe you can. And here's an example of someone who did, and God used her in an incredible way. Yeah, I totally love that, Sarah. I know we're running out of time. There is a couple other different examples of women that we see at Jesus's tomb. There's this beautiful verse that talks about at his crucifixion, right? And so the soldiers are bringing Jesus down, and it says this one verse. I'll read it to you guys. I won't worry about sharing my screen again, but it says, oh, where is it? Just disappeared. Give me 1 second. It says in Matthew, many women were there watching from a distance. They had followed Jesus from Galilee to take care of his needs. Among them were Mary Magdalene, Mary, the mother of Jesus and Joseph, and the mother of Zebedee's son. I love that idea that these women, there was disciples that were near and close to Jesus and devoted to his ministry and to following after him and to taking care of his needs. And even at his darkest hour, even at perhaps his most vulnerable time, they were there. They were close by watching. And they were the first people to attend to his tomb, to go to change the dressings. And because of that, because of their devotion, because of their faithfulness, because of that relationship and that proximity, they were the first to be eyewitnesses to his resurrection. Like, how incredible is that? Like, sometimes we kind of go like, oh yeah, like, and then Jesus appeared to Mary and Martha just because they were there. Well, where were the other guys? Like, that's my question. Where were the 12 that were following him for 3 years and part of the ministry and doing the miracles? I don't know, but these women were there. And that speaks not just to like, oh, okay, again, it's not this like women are better than men. No, it just speaks to what's going on in that society, how even a woman's witness and her voice and her credibility wasn't even recognized. For her to be the first person to give testimony to Jesus's resurrection is remarkable. It's revolutionary. It is like, talk about subverting societal norms. And sometimes we read the Bible and we think, oh, it's just this old book. I don't even get it. Like, some of these things, like, somebody throw a dictionary at me already. And so, yeah, I feel that. Don't worry. I get that. Some of those names I just skip over because I can't pronounce them and it's just a bit too awkward, right? But then there's these little moments where I was like, they made a note here. That's interesting. We just went through all these different things. And then, oh yeah, Rahab, she's in the lineage of Jesus. That's interesting. Wasn't she a prostitute? Interesting. You know what I mean? Like, it's sometimes the little details that if we allow ourselves to, we pay attention to, it could be transformative. It could be something that, today you might feel a bit like, oh yeah, like I want to come to Bible college, or yes, I want to study, but I've got these other dreams, or I've got these other things that I need to do. And I don't know what my career is going to look like or what my future is going to look like. Perhaps I put that on the back burner for now. But maybe like some of these stories would be an encouragement of maybe you can trust God in that, in the unknown, in that it's not this perfect, polished, like clear answer, but it's your devotion, your faithfulness, your proximity to Jesus is what he asks for. And the rest, the result of that can be transformative, but that's not the goal. The goal is proximity to Jesus. The goal is faithfulness to Jesus. The rest comes, and wow, that'll be cool, but that's kind of like a lesser value. So yeah, that's a little bit of this. I was going to leave you with this one quote from Catherine Booth. So Catherine Booth, her and her husband were basically the founders of the Salvation Army. And she's got this incredible story of how she felt like God filled her, like the Spirit of God filled her to preach. And this was a time period that women weren't doing that. And within the denomination that they're part of, women, of course, didn't do that. And she really kind of had to be like, okay, if God's called me to this, then no man can close that door or shut my mouth. And she trusted God, even though it was painful and it was hard. And she wrote this to her children after she passed, or before she passed. We are made for, okay, sorry, I'll say that again. We are made for ends larger than earth can encompass. Oh, let us be true to our exalted destiny. And I just think that is the most beautiful picture, the most beautiful words to leave, is like, let us be true to the exalted destiny that God has placed in you. Whether you're a man or a woman, whether you're young, you're old, whether you are far along in your career or your pursuits, or maybe you're just starting out and trying to figure it out, it doesn't matter, because the goal is Jesus. The goal is closeness and faithfulness to Christ. And the result will be a beautiful story. But we can trust that God is faithful, that we can trust that as these things work out, he will be true to who he is. Is that cool? All right, let's do any other questions, or Rachel, pass it over to you.
That was amazing, Dorothy. Oh, well done. Incredible. Absolutely loved that talk, and I'm just so inspired to dive, more into studies of women in the Bible. I was going to say theology. Oh, same. But yeah, that was incredible. And I know that we are running, maybe we have like eight or so minutes. So if you guys do have any other questions, feel free to pop it in the chat. And if we don't get around to answering it within the next 7 minutes, then what I'll do is I'm going to drop in an email for you guys to contact our team. So if you guys have any kind of questions at all about women in the Bible, any questions that you would love to direct to Dorothy, myself, or even questions to our future students team about like the application process and what it's actually like to study at Hillsong College, feel free to contact this email, future.students@hillsong.com. So you guys could drop an email there, and we'll have team readily available to reply to you perhaps on the day of, or even you could also book a call with our team as well via this link. So I have my number 2. But yeah, feel free to click on that link if you guys have any questions at all that you want to, discuss, chat about. We'll have team so keen to meet you and help you every step of this way. And before we close, I would love to say that I'm not too sure if any of you know, but we do have a giveaway in this session. And so while this was happening, I was doing a random generation selector thingy on Google to choose who the winner will be in this session. And it chose the number 3. And so what I did was I just counted 1, 2, 3, and it landed on Michelle. So Michelle, you've actually won a free Hillsong College Grade t-shirt that's valued at $32.76. So congratulations, Michelle. What I'm going to need from you is I'll need you to pop in your email address. You can direct message me that. Pop in your email address, your size, and then we'll go from there. And yeah, I'll give you a call. I'll contact you. We'll sort that all out. But yeah, congrats.
Well, thank you so much. And all the talk was amazing. I was really inspired by you, Dorothy. Thanks, Juliet.
I love that. We're so pumped to have you here, Michelle. And before we end this session, I would also love to invite you all, what my words stuttering. I would also love to invite you all to tune into the next sessions that we have coming up. I believe that we'll have a couple more at 10:15. That's Sydney time. So that's around like 15-20 minutes from this moment. You can tune into lectures like the art of storytelling, financial generosity, and financial stewardship and courageous generosity, how to worship lead in the church, all these fun classes. So what I'll do is I'll drop a link so that you guys can see the rest of the schedule, or you could also press your email, click on your email that we've sent you, because we've also given you the schedule there as well. And last but not least, my friends, I would also love to mention that there is one more giveaway. So if you guys apply or submit your application before the 1st of October, which is this Friday, you will be in the draw to win a free Apple Watch SE. Woo! So one of these babies. So yeah, if you apply before Friday, you'll be in the draw to win that. And applications are currently free as well. So there's literally nothing to lose, everything to gain. So yeah, I'll pop in a link so that you guys can learn more about how that all works. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the day. Tune into the next classes, the next few sessions that we have coming up. And if you guys have any questions at all, like I said, feel free to contact future.students@hillsong.com, or even head to our website and you'll find all of our contact details there as well. So yeah, we love you all and we can't wait to meet you hopefully very soon. And yeah, we can't wait to see you in the next few sessions. Enjoy the rest of your day, you guys. Be blessed. Mwah.
So good to meet you all.